turned into this like light salmon color, brothy. For them, it was like, look at all these Jolly Ranchers, because it's like time travel. Y'all, this has been a wild year. Hey Rockstars, it's Amara, and today we're talking about all things online video conventions. The mandatory stuff. Been to a convention, thought about going to a convention, like up this video. You can hit subscribe so you're part of the next adventure, ring the bell so you get notifications sent to your inbox. And if you're part of a YouTube community and you want to share some information about going to various VidCons, please do share this video. I'd love to answer more questions in the comments below. As you may know, I went to all 3 of the VidCons this year. That's VidConEU, VidCon in the US, and VidCon in Australia. I also went to Summer in the City in London, and I went to PodCon. The first thing we're going to talk about is VidCon Europe. This was my first ever VidCon. It was also my first VidCon outside of the US. It was the first time they ever did VidCon in Europe. This is the cover for the VidCon Europe manual. You may recognize it from a DIY I did a while ago about turning memories into kind of positive motivation. I'll link that above. This is the actual manual right here. Like your instruction guide, what's happening, where you can go, what your passes mean, what the different levels are. All the VidCons are split into 3 levels. Industry pass, your creator passes, and your attendee passes. I was a creator at all of the VidCons, so they're all at the same level. VidCon Europe, or VidConEU, happened at the RAI Convention Center in Amsterdam, which is a little train ride out of the downtown area, 25 minutes or so of a really direct train that takes you right there. I didn't have Wi-Fi for any of my travel when I was traveling internationally this year, so if I can get there easily, you guys can get there easily. Also, it took me to a part of Amsterdam that I think is really kind of cool and I probably never would have seen if I hadn't gone there. Right outside where the convention center is located is this little neighborhood. There are all kinds of shops. I went to a newsstand in there, a toy store. There was a store all about Miffy the bunny. I had like super hyper condensed juice at one of the cafes there. There's also a grocery store right across the way. Oh, and I was told there is a gelato shop on that same like strip. I went as a creator track. That meant that I had access to the creator lounge. Creator lounges are cool because they're a space where you can just kind of sit and talk. At VidCon Europe, I loved the creator lounge. It was really beautiful. Like, it just was pretty. I kept thinking to myself, this place is really Pinterest worthy. Little flowers, couches everyone was sitting and talking at, and it felt like a real community building space. So I thought that was like a really cool element of that particular layout. The expo hall for VidCon Europe was gigantic. Kind of like a big airplane hangar, and there were big glass doors on one side. It felt really like a big open space. If you wanted to talk to someone and stay within the expo hall, you really could just kind of wander off to a side of it. I thought the expo hall was really nice. It was also really good as a creator because you could shoot at different angles. Like, you'd get way away from everything, you get up close to things. The meet and greet area was off to one side. In the back was where they did a lot of main stage shows, but even for a main stage area, it was felt even more open than a lot of them do. That might have to do with the way it was laid out specifically, but it felt really inviting and like curiosity pulling. It felt like you kind of wanted to get in there and like check out everything because it was this big open awesome creative space. And there was room for things like a big hamster ball, for like a human hamster ball, and then you could just like roll down this thing. If I go next year and it's there again, I will do that, you guys. One of the things I want to talk about with each of the conventions is a panel I loved. I don't have time to go through all the panels I loved, but one of the panels I really loved at VidCon Europe was called Building a Team. It had Hank Green on it, Jen McAllister, and the Fine Brothers, and they were all talking about building a creative team. What actually is the information you want from real business owners and business creators. That panel was so interactive. There were moments where someone would suggest something, like Jen McAllister would suggest something and say like Hank Green would be like, maybe we should do that on my team. And because it was that much of an honest discussion between entrepreneurs, I felt like that was one of the coolest panels to get to be part of and to be there for. With each of these conventions, I also want to do a standout moment. At the end of VidCon Europe, Rhett and Link did this thing where they blended all kinds of foods that are like classic Amsterdam food. There was some fish in there, they did some chocomel, I think there might have been some licorice in there. There was all kinds of stuff that they put in the blender, turned into this light salmon color, brothy, gross. After they tried it, they invited one member of the audience to come out, and the girl who did it, I saw her afterwards when we were all leaving. She had like the cup of it and she offered me a sip of it, and I said no because I was about to get on an airplane, and you know, fish chocomel plus airplane across the world sounded like a bad plan. But it was really cool to have that experience on a stage and come into this interaction with this person. One of the beautiful things about something like VidCon is it really like cracks the internet open and it's suddenly like real life everywhere. I liked VidCon Europe so much that I framed this, but also so much that I really decided after I got home that I wanted to see where it came from, the big VidCon that everything came from. And that is how I ended up going to VidConUS. Voila! VidConUS. I'm gonna put this over this one. As someone with a long history of convention culture, I really wanted to see VidCon in the US because it is such a big convention, and I just kept thinking to myself, wouldn't it be cool to go to VidConUS and make all kinds of friends that live closer to home while being at like the biggest and most established of the VidCons? And that's exactly what I did. This was the 8th annual VidConUS. It is in Anaheim, California, right across the way from Disneyland. It is not hard to find. You know there's a way to get from LAX to Disneyland, y'all. So the location of it, really pretty easy to get to. It is worth noting, it is located in Anaheim's tourism district, meaning things are of the cost of a regular tourism district. The location for VidCon in Anaheim is also really close to a Starbucks, and it's really close to a Coffee Bean, and there were also a number of diners and fast food places within walking distance. So if you're looking to do like cheap eats, go to VidCon, totally plausible. You may have to walk a little bit, but it's a nice area. I did a lot of walking out into Anaheim, a couple blocks in all directions around the space, and it was fine and easy. The actual convention center, the Anaheim Convention Center, it has 3 levels set up perfectly to match the 3 levels of passes. The top tier of the building, that was where the industry was. The creator lounge was on the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor was attendees. It was really easy to navigate. Their expo hall floor was gigantic, very, very full of things. There were candy booths. There was a Nickelodeon booth where you could get slimed on. I remember there was something where there was drawing on the ground in chalk, like a live chalk drawing. There were booths for movies that were coming up. In the back of the room, there was also a stage. There were a couple stages off to the side in like a bigger piece of the expo hall. It was fun because they were in like dark rooms where they were doing a stage that was lit up. There was a really good sense of like exploring despite the fact that there were people everywhere. There was a giant Escape the Night banner. YouTube Red was really going all out, and Escape the Night was really like on point during this one. Joey Graceffa advertisements. That boy be escaping the night all the time. I would like to also say, just for the record, the more I was at online video conventions, the more I was meeting people versus going and sitting through panels. I often watch some of the panels online afterwards. Jonathan Katz did a workshop called How to Contract. I was like, okay, you're gonna sit through a panel and you're gonna do your homework, you're gonna retract some money out of going to VidCon. And what ended up happening was I felt like very much more educated about some of the things that go wrong with contracts when you're a creator, some of the things you should think about while you're getting into contracts, best practices, the legal things that surround creator contracts are changing, and what models they're using, because this is all new media. This is all like an idea that's still being hammered out on a lot of levels, and where do they pull the concepts of how these contracts look from? As a good panel does, it left me with more things to like look up later and more things to think about later. Really got me thinking about the contracts angle of this and how I want to set up contracts in the future regarding my channels, so that's cool. If you take the money and time to go to get a creator pass, consider going to 1 or 2 that are specifically for education reasons. It's part of what you pay more for in having that pass. That's a 10 cents. It's an Amara 10 cents. One of the things that I think was most different about VidCon in the US is I was walking into a really well-established community. A lot of people are re-meeting their friends there. They're seeing their friends they've seen for years at VidCon. And unlike VidCon Europe and VidCon in Australia, VidConAus, it was interesting to see people navigating the water of new things versus navigating the water of really well-established conventions. I will also say VidCon in the US had huge additional things. They had a huge extra stage that was sponsored by Hollister, like on one corner. This is not sponsored by Hollister. They had a huge creator kickoff event that was actually streamed live. I didn't watch that from within the event. I actually watched that at a party I was at. There was a Ferris wheel, there was a ball pit, just like a lot of things to interact with and a ton of people. It was a really big convention. I've been to a lot of big conventions. I work with a lot of big conventions. VidCon was maybe the 3rd or 4th biggest convention I've ever seen out of about 17 years of convention world. It's a big one. Because of its location, it is also the one of the VidCons I can promise I will be at this year also. I did buy tickets to go to VidConUS the day they came out, which was while we were at the convention, partially because I was like in the spirit. What a good time to be selling something. Hey, you're having a great time now? Have a great time next year. Hit this button and buy now. I totally did. It was a great idea. But I don't want that to sound like I don't want to go back to VidCon Europe and VidCon Australia. There's a reality that is time and monetarily expensive. As much as I'd love to go to both the other 2, we'll see. I'm not sure. Standout moment from VidConUS for me was watching the concert series on the 2nd day. Maybe like 20 of my friends, and we were all like dancing and singing. The band that does the intro for Kimmy Schmidt, they were there and they sang like a version of Rockstar, the song by Smash Mouth. And then later Hank Green came on and he sang it again. And the whole like audience sang, and I just thought it was super cool. And because you guys are rock stars, and rock stars are what we call people in my community, I just was like 11 excited. It was so great. And it was just really great also just to be like singing and dancing with my friends. It's nice to take a break from a big day of like meeting people and conventions and panels and like sing and dance and be part of the internet magic of the communities that build around something like this. I'll get into that more on the community building video in the future, part 2. Coming soon. Summer in the City, delightfully known by locals as SiTC, is a very different event. My understanding, SiTC grew out of a fan meetup into being Summer in the City, this convention that happens. It's at the Excel Center, which is very far down in London. It is not a single train ride to get there from where I was staying, which was in Shoreditch. Because it was so far and I had to commute there and commute back, I couldn't stay as late as I wanted to. I would have probably stayed late into the night there hanging out with people, but the train stopped running around midnight and I did not want to have to navigate a multi-stop bus system at night in deepest London. If you'd had access to Wi-Fi, which I didn't, it probably would have been a much easier thing to navigate, but for me that was a real challenge. Surrounding SiTC are a number of restaurants, there are some pubs, there are restaurants that are attached to hotels, and within the building, the Excel Center itself, there is a food court, and there were burritos and poke and stuff like that, so there were a lot of options, all located within that building. Aside from the Excel Center though, when you go outside, and aside from restaurants and hotels, that's pretty much what's around you. There's not really, like, at least that I was aware of, a place that would be easy to go venturing off into in that area. Now, what I will say about SiTC is it feels really different than VidCon. There are stages, there are panels, there is also a craft zone. The meet and greet areas were all located within one main expo hall. In fact, most of the event exists in a main expo hall, and there's a couple extra rooms for additional panels off to one side and a main stage off to the other side, and that is your location. It's basically all within that area. There were a lot of things that were really neat for me as an American there. There was a whole candy stand that just sold American candy, which I had no idea was such like an interesting thing, but much like how we are fascinated with what you eat in other countries standardly, people are fascinated with our candy selection in the US. Going through that area with a bunch of my local friends was really pretty funny, because for me it's like, yeah, there's a bunch of Jolly Ranchers, but for them it was like, look at all these Jolly Ranchers. So there was a lot of questions like, is this a food you eat all the time? Is this a candy that you run into all the time? You know, is this exceptional or not? SiTC is really set up for you to have friends to wander with. If you're just looking to go booth hopping all day every day, there's a limited number of booths. There were a number of panels. I went to a few of them. The panel that I loved at SiTC was the travel panel. Travel creators were just discussing these like really extreme travel moments they've had when they're going into dangerous places with lots of gear, how they navigate those waters, stories of how that's gone well or bad. One of the gals mentioned that she always puts her passport like in her pants when she's in dangerous environments, because if everything gets stolen from her, at least she has her passport with her. That's a little bit like adventure journalism. You have to kind of get out there. It's like very Rory Gilmore. A standout personal moment at Summer in the City was watching Dodie perform. It was cool to see Dodie perform, but at that point I'd seen her perform twice earlier that year. What was really cool about watching her perform at Summer in the City, it was really nice to see Dodie connecting with all the people that were there. Her music seems to affect specifically the teenagers in the area. That's always cool to be part of in a concert space, but it was really neat to have it be in a YouTube space within another country by a creator who's from that country as someone who's not from there. And I also got to experience that with some of my new friends, and that was really cool for me. Then, the third and final, the VidCon Australia in Melbourne. I'd never been to Australia. I'd never been to VidCon Australia because there hadn't been one, but it was a full-on across the world adventure for me, and just so thankful, so thankful that I was part of it. VidCon Australia is in a big building, a big convention center with a boat in front of it, super downtown in Melbourne. It's really close, like 2 blocks away from one of the main buses that takes you from the airport and drops you in downtown. Got off the plane, got on the bus, rolling luggage 2 blocks at my hotel, another 1.5 blocks, there was the convention center. Very easy. Navigating in Melbourne is completely plausible. You can get a MyKey card and just kind of hop around. There is a lot of food and little shopping malls across from the convention center. Lots of places to buy things. There was a casino, food court really close to it, coffee shops further down, just a big walking area with all kinds of options. The location is really neat and it's really beautiful. It's on the Yarra River. The actual layout of the convention center, there is a downstairs expo hall that is pretty easy to access. It's pretty big. And then you go further into the building, and then there's different levels for the creator lounges and the industry lounges and different pathways, but they're all laid out pretty well. So again, pretty easy to navigate that whole scene. There was a door set you opened at the creator level, and there was where they did the creator keynote, and a creator lounge that had back-to-back doors. That was kind of neat. I didn't go to as many panels at VidCon Australia because I was so busy being like, once in a lifetime opportunity to meet people in Australia. I did, however, go to the creator keynote. It really explained a lot of things that had to do with the local television scene in Australia. Learning about the way media works in that country is really fascinating. Concepts I'd never heard about, comedy and stylings I've never run into. That was a really good mix of getting to see like a slice of Australia's YouTube and a slice of big YouTube space in general as a creator. In terms of special moments, sitting in a circle with people talking about what they hope the future of Australia's VidCon and online community looks like, learning about Australia through creators' eyes, perceptions of each other's countries. That was a really amazing part of VidCon Australia, and talking about like what it meant to be a person who was a video creator, and also listening to people talk about how thankful they were to get to meet other creators. Micro moments that grew like that, that's a lot of what VidCon Australia was about for me. More about community building moments in the part 2 video. Talk about PodCon. Because I'm so involved with the Seattle events community, I got a message saying, Hank Green is gonna throw a podcast convention in Seattle. And I was like, buy tickets. I wanted to see what the amazing convention staff that runs VidCon would do in Seattle, especially at the Washington State Convention Center, which is like the convention center I know the best in the world. And also because I'm interested in podcasts and learning more about them. And it was in Seattle, and after a year of amazing adventures at VidCon, I thought, they can't throw one in my backyard and I don't go. PodCon was a mid-sized convention for podcast enthusiasts. There were a lot of really cool things like meetups. There was a expo hall. There were a lot of panels, and most of all, there was a lot of people talking to each other. A lot of pop-up conversations. Saw a lot of creators that were panelists on stages come out and just be so excited to talk to their fans more. And of course, they're people who talk because they're podcast people and they're funny. Oh my gosh, I laughed so much at the opener and the closer. It was so great. And that was amazing. The interactive smartness between podcast people, because they're just so fast. I worked as a volunteer at PodCon. One of my favorite things was popping into the Podcasters of Color panel and listening to the discussions that were happening around the challenges that are faced by podcasters of color, but also the things that unite their community. I thought that was really neat because I think those are issues that really affect all of us. How to get like a comprehensive worldview in a world where we all come from different places, and where does that happen? Their discussion was so good that I hated having to be the person who held up the 5-minute sign. I just wanted them to keep talking, and I was really lucky to get to meet a couple of the podcasters that were in that panel. I talked with Rod and Karen Morrow. We had a chat afterwards about how much they loved coming to visit. They were from Charlotte and had come specifically to interact with their community here in Seattle. I grew up in North Carolina, so I hear that a little bit. Two things that were really, really cool about PodCon: a lot of opportunities for meetups based on specific interests. They also had an event called Podcast Scramble, where they'd pull people off of different established podcasts, put them in a room and have them talk about something new. What a cool way to bring together not just a unique moment for PodCon, but also to bring together a unique mix of community, because maybe they're fans from one of them or from the other one would trickle in, and then they'd be able to share with each other. I just thought it was such a cool idea for community building, so I thought that was really good. And if you're interested in PodCon, from what I see on Twitter, you can purchase a virtual ticket to PodCon, and then you can listen to all of the panels. You get one also when you attended it, and I'm gonna go back and actually revisit PodCon and listen to panels I couldn't go to, because it's like time travel. I went to a lot of conventions this year. This wasn't even all the conventions I went to this year. This is definitely not all the conventions I've ever been to, but the question everyone wants to know, which was the best? You ready for a very unsatisfying answer? The answer is all of these experiences have changed my life. I'm a completely different person for every one of these conventions that I went to, and that is not the case with all conventions I've ever been to in my life. These were game changers, and each of these booklets also, in addition to being here, is like a little pile of my friends. It's hard for me to choose one because it would be like me choosing the wonderful people I know in Europe and the wonderful people I know in Australia and my crew from VidCon in the US. Can't tell you which one's the best. Of all the things I've ever done in my life, choosing to do this was one of the best things I've ever done. All of the people I met here were amazing, and I more than anything want to say a shout out to all of my international friends that I met at any of these events. Thank you guys so much for making 2017 a year that was more than I knew a year could be. You literally took a world of ideas for me and made them real. By being part of this community of rock stars, you continue to make Amara in Seattle, a story of a girl who lives in a place, inspiring a community of creative, driven, awesome people throughout the world. And you guys are the best, and I love it. There's no way I could shoot enough footage to cover this. I know you have more questions. Leave them in the comments below. I will do my best to answer questions as best as I can. We're gonna do a part 2 video later this month on the community building facet of this. That is the story of why you really want to go. Yo, this has been a wild year. Thanks for watching Rockstars Best Adventures. It's Amara in Seattle. Top of the Space Needle, rain pouring down. Thanks for being part of my community of Rockstars. You guys rock!